The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to our program, Faith Matters, here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegy, Bishop Doc Loomis, and Reverend Karl Zorowski. And we are talking about different articles in the news from this past week and how it intersects with our faith. One of the things that, of course, has been one of the lead stories this past week was about the bombings in New York and New Jersey, the different devices that were set off or were discovered and found, and then through surveillance footage and also some lucky breaks. A guy actually seeing the suspect asleep in the bar vestibule. Is that Ahmad Rahmani, 28-year-old, was arrested and charged with 5 counts of attempted murder of a law enforcement officer after the shootout in Linden, New Jersey, and then will also be facing, and has been charged actually with federal charges since this article was written on CNN, this first one looking at here, that was written back on the 19th, on Monday, just 48 hours, or less than 48 hours actually, after the occurrence of these bombings. The chase ended when Rahmani was shot multiple times. He was taken to a hospital for surgery, and he was not initially cooperative with police who tried to interview him. They believe that since then, now we've learned much more about his journal that he was carrying, about other things that were found in his home, a little bit more about his family, his trips to Afghanistan, etc. But in that 48 hours or so, from the time of the bombings until he was captured, and also some of the things were discovered about him, there was a lot of speculation and also political wrangling over what to call this, and we seem to be going through that a lot. I'm going to get to a commentary on that in just a moment, but Robert, we saw the presidential campaigns jump out on it. We saw, because this happened on a Saturday night and a Sunday morning, there was a lot of talk in churches about what was going on here. And again, the idea of jumping to conclusions here was part of the internet story.
It was a buzz, as they say, right, with that controversy. Well, look, we have a history of this, don't we? We have a history. We called the shooting at Fort Hood
workplace violence.
Workplace violence. So this would be in that category of things. We have a new category. We have it called public place violence. Mm-hmm. And so we had an experience of public place violence. Now, we don't know exactly what happened, although there was a large explosion in that place. And we're not sure if a bomb was involved in that or somebody's Big Mac blew up. But we're just not sure what happened. But it was definitely a terrible thing. And I just want to assure you, as the chief of police assured the public on the radio, that everything that could possibly be done is being done and more.
Well, as it was taking, it didn't take very long for it to play out and understand, but it just in that period of time, though, there was rampant disagreement over whether or not we even want to call these, as you said, a bomb. I mean, right. The political candidates went off.
Well, obviously, one of the political candidates did immediately call it a bombing. And then we're so polarized now politically that the entire media, mainstream media, had to jump on that and just try to undermine it. And the other political candidates as well. So that's how fragmented we are in this, pardon the pun, in this nation over these kind of things.
Are we? Is it wrong are we saying things as they are properly, or are we just so afraid to step on somebody's toes that we just can't call a a bomb that's made out of a pressure cooker, a bomb, or we have to call it some sort of explosive device, but it can't have that sort of trigger language.
I think we've come to the point that people are too afraid of offending someone and too afraid of hurting somebody's feelings and saying something that is that appears to be politically incorrect, and we can't even hear the truth anymore. If I turn on the news, I could watch Fox News and I can hear a story. I could watch MSNBC and I can hear a story. Which one of them is telling me the truth? I can make a decision, say, well, these guys are telling me the truth, these guys are telling me the truth, or maybe the truth lies somewhere in between one story and another story. I remember growing up, you could turn on the news at night, and the chances were pretty good that what you were hearing were the facts. And now what we're hearing are opinions more than facts.
The stories go on and went on until, and including after he has been captured. And this commentary that was in Christian Post by guest commentator Susan Stamper Brown, she writes, 12 hours of terror, just another weekend in leftist-run America. We live in a country run by people who tell us that if a man puts on a dress and says he's a woman, we're supposed to take him at his word. But if a man goes on a murderous rampage in the name of Allah and ISIS claims responsibility, this was in the case in the mall in Minnesota, says we shouldn't draw conclusions. The weak and ridiculous position in which we find ourselves did not happen on its own. Americans selected this band of leftist fools who have zero aptitude for dealing with terrorism. A quote from King Solomon, the wisest earthly leader to ever grace the planet, comes to mind. As dead flies give perfume to a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. The heart of the wise inches to the right, but the heart of the fool to the left. Even as fools walk along the road, they lack the sense and show everyone how stupid they are. From Ecclesiastes 10, 1 through 3. Thanks to those whose hearts incline to the left, the terrorism, which once was a rarity in America, can happen anytime and anywhere, and does. Doc, are we living in a new world where we are, what we are afraid to speak of is in fact reality?
This is a world of words and symbols. You know, the sacramental church, the church has known that for a long time. But right now what's happening is our words and symbols are being stolen and turned into things that they don't any longer, that they didn't used to mean. We see this with marriage. A gay marriage is not a marriage. A marriage is a man and a woman becoming one flesh. A gay union is something else, but it's not a marriage. The rainbow that once was the sign of God's offer to never clean off the world again is now the symbol for unity and inclusivity and gay pride. This is all a battle of words, and what we know is if you want to win a battle, you first steal the language away and you change it. And what's happening right now is whether it's inserting new words like sexual identity or
fluidity.
Gender fluidity. Oh my.
Yeah.
Or what we're seeing right here, where we can't call things what they are because, frankly, no one's sure what to call them or who it's going to injure, is just a very clear sign that this gal is right, that the left is winning a war of words and symbols.
Meanwhile, we have enemies who are not using words and symbols. They're using real
They're using
weapons.
both,
Yeah.
actually, is what they're doing. They're redefining what love is. They're redefining what peace is. They're redefining all the fruit of the Spirit. They're giving it, they're redefining all that, and that it's, it's available through Allah. But, going back.
Who is incidentally God.
Yeah, exactly.
The same God.
Yeah.
That's stealing a word.
That's exactly right. They have stolen the
God.
identity of God.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. But the fact is, truth is that which corresponds to reality.
Right.
You can have all kinds of ideas and opinion about what truth is, but that doesn't tell you what truth is. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. Now, the interpretation of that is where we get into the ditch. And we have in America come up with and embrace this idea that truth is relative to your particular perspective about things. And so, in fact, to the point that at least in the media, in the mainstream media, they are pretty much all agree on this relativity factor. And so that they can just express the words and that the words actually create the reality.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And not describe it, but create it. And that's where we're in this dilemma now.
And then we codify those words into new law.
Correct. Right. And so now what happens is when anything happens like a bombing or something like like that would undermine this declared reality, the reality of that reality, what do? They deny the reality of that which is threatening their artificial reality, their made-up reality. You following me?
Yes. Well, it's the same thing as she talked about at the very beginning. As this writer says, in a country run by people that if a man puts on a dress and says he's a woman, we are supposed to take him at his word. He is speaking that into existence, as I said last week, and that's not reality.
But he's not God. God can do that, but he can't do that.
More to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the talk station FM 107 and AM 1240. And hope that you'll stick around and join us for our next segment. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with the Reverend Karl Zorowski, Bishop Doc Loomis, and also Reverend Robert Cornegy, as we talk about some of the other stories that are out there for today. And this one is a follow-up because we had the story originally about a county in Georgia that was looking at what was originally just a planning, I think, board meeting, was talking about a new mosque that was to be built. And the Washington Post follow-up on this story since then says Georgia officials were set to approve a new mosque until an armed militia threatened to protest. The story, again, is written by Cleve Woodson Jr., says, for decades, leaders in Newton County, Georgia, have tried to make things easy for anyone who wanted to build a church with zoning rules that have a place of worship exception to streamline the construction process. But recent plans for a mosque complicated things and for county leaders. About a month ago, word spread that Muslims wanted to build the county's first mosque on an empty plot at Highway 162 and County Line Road. Since then, a Muslim leader says a quagmire of bureaucracy and Islamophobic public meetings have shined a glaring national spotlight on this county of about 100,000 people, 35 miles east of Atlanta. The latest wrinkle came this week when county commissioners, citing security concerns, canceled a meeting that was expected to allow construction of the mosque to move forward. The concerns arose after a self-described militia group from a neighboring county posted a video on Facebook threatening to demonstrate outside the meeting with guns drawn. Okay, let's when we back up here and we look at the story that we talked about originally, Doc, I think as we were looking at it, the perspective of the story then was a Islamic leader, or he had a small mosque and he had outgrown it and was going to look for new property, and it became once it became known, this raised the specter of what is this going to be, a training ground, is Sharia law, and all the other things, and so the county just put a moratorium on any religious building coming up. Well, they were about to lift that, apparently, when this news story broke. But you've done a little research into this background of this. What are you finding out here?
Well, we're finding a lot of surprises. Number one, this wasn't a little fellow in his little mosque that outgrew. It's a big corporation, 501, that is Islamic run, and its intent purpose is to put together these kinds of communities and mosques. I mean, let's be real. You buy 135 acres, you put a school a mosque, a cemetery, and a residential community on it, what have you really built?
A planned community.
You've built a community, exactly. Yeah. And so that's the goal. And you're building that community in a state that has 10 million people, in a region that has, if you really stretch, maybe 100,000. And based on the percentage of Muslims in Georgia right now, that means there should be about 50 Muslims within reach of this particular area. So a 135-acre complex seems a little, I mean, even by, even by Anglican standards, and we always overbuild, it seems a little overdone. So the question then becomes, so why are we doing this? Why are we building this amazing facility for a place that should have about 50 Muslims? And that was the concern that maybe it was going to be an area for training and where the refugees would get dumped, if you will, there. The other side of this is that the corporation that we're talking about is actually in the middle of a DeKalb County, Georgia lawsuit dating back 3 years for violation of all of the ordinances that they agreed to when they first put their mosque up in DeKalb County. And that's property that's gone derelict, sewage that's overflowed, violations of noise ordinance, violations of traffic ordinances, and the list goes on. So there's a concern among the folks in Newton that this may be a repeat performance. And the last thing is, I think, just the way that they went about doing this. When the paperwork was originally filed in Newton, it was filed under the name Avery Community Church. Now, I don't know, if I saw a sign on a building that said Avery Community Church, I wouldn't expect to go in.
Yes, coming soon.
I wouldn't expect to go in and see people kneeling and facing Mecca at that point. So I think they feel like maybe they weren't completely honest with them. Yeah. So a lot of news has actually come to the front since that original little story about the poor man wanting to grow his mosque and those evil people in Newton saying he couldn't do it.
Is this something that, this is a land, I think that has another church across the street from this property, I believe.
Baptist.
Yeah, Baptist church. And is this something that people that are believers or non-believers ought to be concerned with in rural Georgia? What do you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just as Doc has so eloquently expressed that there seems to be a hidden agenda behind this process. What we're finding out as more people dig into the facts about this organization is that this is a strategy for benefiting from the influx of immigrants that are now coming into the United States under this administration. And in fact, that will be increasing depending on how the election goes coming up. And that they have mapped out this plan that around rural areas of the United States, Georgia's just one of them, that they're going to establish these communities. And this is where these, and I would probably think they may be getting some federal funding from this, from the Department of Homeland Security, to find places for these people to go. So, that's a speculation, but, that's the way these things work. This is what you find often is that there's this network, kind of hidden network of things going on, and what we see on the front, what is filed in the courthouse and whatever, is a facade. It's a, like we've said before, it's like a mirage that they put up there to distract us from what the actual agenda is. Well, Karl, and that's not a paranoia point.
Yeah.
I think it's a kind of interesting strategy that they have. And in some ways, it makes
I would say
sense.
that we all know, Karl, I think we all know probably in this room, that anybody building a church usually draws fire from a neighborhood. Right? I mean, it's not always the easiest thing to do, no matter where you are. But.
Right, no matter where you are and no matter what faith you're representing. But you know what? I hear discussions here about problems with the transparency here. I understand the concerns that the people in the county may have. And when you have events like this, and I'll call it a bomb going off in New York over the weekend, certainly I understand where people's concerns come from. However, the response of this group, I'm not sure that's the way we need to respond to concerns. You've got a group of people who are in fear of what could bring violence into their community. And so their response is to respond in kind with more violence or with a threat of violence. I'm not sure that an armed militia group is necessarily the best way to get your voice heard.
Well,
I mean, it's certainly a way to make people listen to you.
Yeah.
But what they have done is, whether they threaten violence or implied violence, a public meeting was canceled because of what they said they were going to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's the right way to approach a problem.
Well, I'm looking at actually this group. It's called 3% Security Force. I'm looking at their Facebook page, and one of the things that they have done actually is a meeting that wasn't canceled. They actually spoke at a Board of Commissioners meeting. And they have some other news stories on there too. They said that a couple of local reporters have told things from their point of view, and I think it's a bit inflammatory. Not that the Washington Post would ever do that, but
No, not at all.
But to say with guns drawn,
right.
that's maybe different from saying from being a group that believes in open carry. In an open carry state.
We
So-
are citizens of the kingdom of God first. And while I'm right with Karl on this one, while I completely agree that these citizens have reason to be concerned, we have to make a choice whether we act, as citizens of our local community or citizens of God first. And Jesus' teaching about this was that we were to interact in these kind of situations. When he sent his disciples out and he talked about sending you out as sheep among wolves, when he talked about persecution that would absolutely come with our faith, then what he suggested that we should be what is it? Wise as serpents and harmless as doves. So we have to be wise. We have to speak the truth. We have to lean hard on what we know to be God's reality. But we have to do it in a way that doesn't turn that on us and make us look like the bad guy, because then these little sheep will get devoured. And the harmless as doves part is what we as Christians right now are missing, I think, in many of these confrontations.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? That this is what percolates into the news, of course, and they really haven't interviewed any of the residents. This group is not even from the same county; it's from another county coming across.
Right.
And the actual people that live in the county, when you look at the article, the only person they show is a gun nut out there with his AK-47 or whatever and AR-15 and his T-shirt and basically protesting. And so so the point being that the media that you made has just obviously has a perspective on this, and they're trying to show that it's. And when they interview the representatives of the Muslim organization, they have the spokesperson who is trained to speak onto these things and speaks about it very clearly. I absolutely agree that bringing out the guns, is not the step. We have to be willing to dialogue.
And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the way that we are fed news. We've heard so much in the last few minutes that was not in this article, which would change very much the tenor of the whole story.
We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the talk station FM 107 and AM 1240. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the talk station FM 107 and AM 1240. I'm Ben Ball, along with Pastor Karl Zorowski, Reverend Robert Cornegy, and Bishop Doc Loomis. And talking on this next article is actually a pair of articles that looks at the same story, but a couple of different perspectives. And one from the Christianity Today. And the headline is "The First Country to Officially Defend Christians Persecuted by ISIS." This is talking about Hungary and their recent efforts. And the next one is from the Express.co UK, so Express in the United Kingdom, says Hardline Hungary spends £2.5 million protecting only Christians to stop them fleeing to the EU. the same stuff, but from different articles here. So let's take a look at the Christianity Today one first. This week, Hungary, which has during the past year come under pressure for its handling of Europe's mass migration crisis, has become the first government to open an office specifically to address the persecution of Christians in the Middle East and Europe. Today, Christianity has become the most persecuted religion, where out of 5 people killed for religious reasons, 4 of them are Christians, according to Catholic News Agency, quoting Hungary's Ministry for Human Resources, Zoltán Balog, as saying, in 81 countries around the world, Christians are persecuted, and 200 million Christians live in areas where they are discriminated against. Millions of Christian lives are threatened by followers of radical religious ideologies. Now, the other article, though, written from the UK perspective, says, in this article, Hungary has splashed out £2.5 million on protecting persecuted Christians in the Middle East in a bid to stop them traveling to Europe as the country tackles the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government has set up a special department to look after the Christians and stop them from becoming migrants. Mr. Orban sanctioned this spend as Hungary prepares to fight the EU over mandatory migrant quotas. All right, both looking at the establishment of this group in Hungary, but looking at very different sorts of reasons or motives behind it. Robert, you have worked in Europe, and you've done some things before with in disaffected Christians around the world. What was your perspective on these two?
It's always been puzzling to me that there hasn't been more of a governmental response to this issue of persecuted Christians in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Governmental, that the European governments and the Western governments, let's say American, Canadian, and others. I mean, the focus has been on the displaced Syrian and Iraqis and others who are Muslims, and not so much on the Christians. And obviously, the ISIS has gone from persecuting Christians to killing Christians, genocide for Christians. They're literally wiping them out, and so. It's always been perplexing. I mean, I get little notices occasionally on my email that says that giving the count. It's almost like keeping a tally of how many Muslims have come into the country in the United States and how many Christians from that area have come into the United States. And it's always hundreds to one. And I know there are a lot of what is it now? 2 million displaced people.
Easily.
Yeah. In the crisis, so it's going to be a disproportionate just because of the nature of the situation over there. But I know they're private organizations, Christian organizations that are involved in this, and we support a couple of them that try to get Christians out and resettled. But it really isn't we don't see that on the governmental level.
I think what struck me about these articles is that I had a hard time gleaning, well, what's really happening here? What is really going on? Because in one article, it seems like from the Christianity Today perspective, they're making a concerted effort to protect Christians. The other one was like, let's protect them by keeping them away, by keeping them out. Did you have that perspective too, Karl?
That was the perspective that I got from it, Ben, that they're more concerned in making sure that the Christians don't come to where they are. It's like, we want to take care of ourselves, so let's do something to keep those other people from coming in and changing our life. Whereas what the problem is, the Christians need to be helped. They need to be protected. And the one article really pointed towards that. It puts them as the focus of the effort. We want to take care of them. We want to help them. The other, it's all about we want to help ourselves, and this is how we can do it.
So what did you take from this, Doc? You've done...
I didn't get quietly, I go into the night. I didn't quite get that same difference. I got that on the one hand, Hungary does want to help Christians, yes. But I think that, look, the best situation is always for a people group who's suffering or under attack or about to be displaced is to give them the freedom to stay where they want to be in their home country. And I think that what Hungary's trying to do is put some efforts toward allowing those people groups to eliminate the persecution. And I don't think it's totally altruistic, but I think governments always look at, what's going to be best for our country and what's going to be best for the people that we care about. So I'm not
as well they should.
Yeah, I'm not quite as angry about that. What the simple reality is, what really angers me is the fact that as a body of Christ, we're supposed to be one body. And that what one part of the body feels, the whole body is supposed to feel. And so if there's pain somewhere, there should be pain everywhere. We always look at the Open Door USA stuff on the show. We've looked at numbers. But, every day there are 12 Christians around the world that are killed for their faith, 332 Christians a month. Every month, over 250 houses of worship and Christian buildings are burned to the ground. I mean, at that rate, how long would it take to kill off every Christian in your local church? In ours, less than a month.
Right.
How long would it take to destroy every church building in Carteret County? In our case, less than a month. I mean, this is the speed with which Christianity is being persecuted. 100 million persecuted, suffering Christians in this world, and we don't talk about it. What we're talking about, even as a Christian body, is the pain and suffering that's being caused people because they have to use the wrong bathroom. Are you serious? This is where we've gotten to? 100 million Christians, and we're concerned about the suffering that... Sorry.
Well, but
please go on with the show. I'm sure you had some uplifting things to say too, but it's very frustrating to me that we don't talk about the fact of this persecution.
But we also brought up some of the frustrations that have existed because of this persecution, because of the elimination of many of these communities in their entirety, is that we don't know where they are. The Christians have dispersed now, and they're not going to the UN camps. They're going elsewhere. So it's been tough to, in fact, even help know who we're helping.
But correct. But before Robert starts, how are you going to help them with $4 million?
Yeah.
Are you serious? $4 million is what, and I know this is just one country, but $4 million. Canada put $3 million towards something like this and closed up the program because $4 million for 100 million suffering Christians. Do the math.
Yeah, the reality of the situation is that the federal organizations that are working on this, whether it be European or American or whatever, they're working through the structure, the governmental format that's in these countries,
exists, yeah.
And that's going to be Islamic. Let's face it. And so the Christians, for them to be able to participate in these programs, are exposing themselves to a huge risk in the first place of just getting into these systems, these refugee systems. You understand that?
Right.
And therefore, they're literally having to do workarounds. They're having to find other ways to get out of here. So, look, 4 million, whatever it is, if there's a country that has identified that they understand that they want people with a similar worldview coming into their country, rather than those who may not share the same worldview with them in Europe or anywhere else. I mean, this is what we were just talking about in Georgia.
Right.
You have this real worldview issue. And as believers, we are sympathetic to the suffering of anyone, Muslim, Christian, Yazidi, or whoever it is. But the reality is you have to deal with them differently. There's a different mechanism for each one of those. And we're not seeing our countries doing that. They're trying to, that's what government does. One size fits all, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so there should be, and it's going to come from the grassroots. It's going to come from the churches, frankly, I think, that are going to have to partner with these folks and try to get them out of there.
And again, trying to find the right groups to partner with as
Correct.
well, too, because we've seen the corruption even within the UN camps. Obviously, we don't go there for that.
No, that's right. I mean, they were marginalized anyway. and now they're even more marginalized. And so it's a real crisis. And as Doc said, we can't be silent on this.
Right. And until the individuals in the church feel compassion for the people who are being persecuted, the churches aren't going to be able to do a thing.
Right.
It has to start with each one
With
of
the
us.
heart. That's exactly right.
And but then there's persecution, as we talk about, in many other countries besides these parts in the Middle East. And in fact, that has become so inflamed in a political struggle for land as well, with ISIS, etc., that it may have gone into different realms of problem solving. In other words, a war problem solving instead of trying to
The competition for resources,
yeah,
right?
that competition, as you said, yes.
Yeah.
So we have to look for those good groups, those sincere groups that we can help to get Christians, either keep them safe in the place and where they want to live, or to bring them to some other place.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben.
It's a very difficult thing, and I think it's not something we're going to solve in this segment, but we're certainly going to think more about that. You're welcome to join us for our final segment coming up in just a moment on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station. In our final segment, I'm Ben Ball, along with Bishop Doc Loomis, Reverend Karl Zorowski, and Reverend Robert Cornegy, and we're talking in this final segment about Bible translation. There's an article that's out, and comes from the Christian Post. It says ESV Bible translation revisions potentially dangerous, Bible scholar warns, written by Brandon Showalter. The debate is stirring over revisions made in the final translation of the English Standard Version Bible regarding gender, with one biblical scholar saying the changes are potentially dangerous. The Crossway Board of Directors and the ESV Translation Oversight Committee said in a statement that the 52 words revised in 29 verses were the culmination of more than 17 years of comprehensive work by the committee, as authorized and initiated by the Crossway Board in 1998. Now, it talks about some of them, and one of the controversial changes can be found in Genesis 3:16. Editors changed the previous translation of Genesis 3:16, which said, "Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." The verse now has been changed to read, "Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you." Robert, we're just off the air talking about translations and the like, and what different folks use, and et cetera. When you see a new Bible translation, and this one as well, how do you approach that?
You have to do kind of the source work, like you mentioned that when
by reading about the translators,
exactly, you have to do that background work and find out what were the source manuscripts that they use for that, and because different Bibles use different sources, so there's a big debate. This is when you do textual criticism, which is good. It's good to do textual criticism. You don't want to do higher criticism, which is bad. But where you're looking at the accuracy, how getting back to those earliest documents, and obviously documents are being discovered all the time. And so there's a great deal of research in there. That doesn't necessarily mean that the documents that are being discovered are the most accurate documents. It may be that the older ones are actually more accurate.
Yeah, that's a lot of the study of Bible
exactly,
translation,
textual criticism.
study. Yeah.
Right. So that's where you have to go. So as a as a theologian, that's what you look for.
Right.
You don't look for necessarily how they treat the words. You look at where's the source, and then you look at it. So first step, background. Second step, how's it rendered? And I think this is pretty accurate rendering, actually, the new rendering of what really was going on. That there was a complementarian position between husband and wife prior to Adam and Eve, prior to the fall. But after the fall, it broke down and it became a competitive or contrarian relationship, and that it seems to be what it actually says.
Karl, where do you fall on this? look at these translations as something you want to find out more about?
This particular translation?
Yeah.
Well, we talked during the break about some of the changes that they have in their translation, and that some of them are actually pretty good and make some sense. But on, say, for example, this one in Genesis 3:16, I find it a little bit troubling, simply because, at least the way that Scripture's always spoken to me, is that with a woman, her desire for her husband is that indicates to me that there's a relationship between the two of them, that she is drawn towards him. And I believe that that's a gift from God, and that God originally created us to complement one another, to be able to be joined together as one. Originally. And even in the light of the fall, that is still God's desire for it to be that way. Does that mean things are always going to work out between the man and the woman? No. Does the older rendering of the Scripture mean that the man should dominate over the woman? I don't think it means that either. But I also don't believe that. This. Well, for me, this new rendering here, it almost indicates that the woman's desire is to overthrow the man or to dominate the man, and I'm not sure that that's what the original writers were intending. When you look at the story of Genesis and you look at the creation stories, one way to look at that is that it was a story of origins. And so for the Hebrew people, as the child was growing up and they say, well, Mom, why is it that Dad is the one that makes the decisions? Well, that was part of their society, the way their family structure was set up. And the mother would then say, well, let me tell you a story about how we came to be God's people. And this is why he is the head of the house.
Okay. The in this article it says Northern Seminary New Testament professor Scott McKnight believes the word changes have profoundly negative implications, and that it suggests that the curse against the woman is an act of God, a curse that seals estrangement, alienation, and tension between females and males, he said in an interview with the Christian Post. So by rendering this verse, the ESV creates the impression that females and males are contrarians with one another.
Something that until he said it, no one knew. Remarkably.
Nobody
Thank you,
knew
Scott
that we
McKnight.
We were contrarian, huh?
It's kind of like,
Are you serious?
duh. Well, yeah, that's the seriousness of sin. What did sin do? What happened when sin came into the world? It divided us. It separated us from God. It separated. It had an internal effect. It actually separated us from ourselves. It separated us horizontally in relationships. Mm-hmm. It had a devastating effect on mankind and on creation. It separated us from we had peace with nature, and it was that peace was broken. So that's how comprehensive sin is. And so it would be to me obvious that it had an effect on that relationship between the man and woman.
Well,
and so that's just, to me, and that's why this verbiage, I think, is a clearer picture of what was trying to be expressed.
Well, to be fair here, we also say that what they changed here is 3:16b, because this is the verse actually is right after the fall. It says, to the woman he said, this is the new NIV version, says, to the woman he said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. As the English Standard Version says, to the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. And in the New Living Translation, the second half of that says, and you will desire to control your husband, but he will rule over you.
Well, we
have several different versions there, Doc.
I think the point that this gentleman makes about that this is a curse from God, I mean, he's shifting the blame. on this. God didn't do this. God gave them free will. They made the choice to rebel against God, to disobey God. They brought this upon themselves. It wasn't God that brought this upon them. He gave them the liberty to make wrong choices. That's what free will does. It gives us the ability to choose the other. We can go with God, or we can choose life, or we can choose death. And they chose death. And the consequence of death is separation from God, separation from his original order, separation from relationship, everything. So to me, that's pretty accurate.
I think it's time to pass.
We've broken our relationship with God through sin. We're all in agreement with that. And God desires for that relationship to be restored. Could not this desire that the woman is going to have for her husband, could that not be an inkling of that desire for restoration?
Could be.
Of relationship.
Yeah, I think the point in the scripture that's being made is the break, and that the consequence of that separation from God is breaking all relationships. Everything changed.
Right.
It was corrupted. There was a corruption from the sin, and so the consequence of that is what we see in the tension. And look, I mean, you kind of have to say there is this competition, if you want to put it politely, between genders that we do have to deal with.
Well, let's get back to the idea of translations for a minute, which is really what this. I mean, it is what it's about.
This is a theological debate.
It is becoming one as people are slowly falling asleep and saying, "Thank goodness it's time for church and I can leave." But we have been translating the Bible from, Erasmus, Tyndale, Coverdale, Luther. I mean, there have been so many. Geneva Bible. You've mentioned one you like, the Holman Bible. There's so many translations of the Bible. This is not. And people ask us as pastors all the time, which I'm glad they do. Which Bible? 3 things to bear in mind. 1, always look in the beginning of the Bible to see how far back the translators are willing to go toward the original texts. 2, look to the credentials of the people to actually accurately translate. And 3, the willingness for these translators to allow the Holy Spirit to move with them while they translate. That's what I tell everybody.
Join us next week for more Faith Matters.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.